internet. Hello, HarmonyCon and all the wonderful folks here. And welcome to the Keeping Friendship Magic podcast, a special live presentation of the Keeping Friendship Magic podcast. And if you're not familiar with what we do here, this is the podcast that looks at all things fandom and pop culture through a lens of social science and experience to hopefully kind of bring us a little closer together, learn a little bit more about what we do in the world and how we can be just a little stronger and a little bit more together and cohesive as a unit. As always, I am your host, Forward Progress, and joined with me is my lovely co-hostess with the mostest,
Nova Rose, as always.
And all right, so welcome. We're doing a thing here. We tried this out at the last convention we were at, and everybody seemed to love it, so we're bringing it back for this one here, where our special guest for this episode is you, the chat. So we actually have a feed to my... over there.
That direction.
of the chat. So we're going to include you guys in the conversation as we go today. We have a few talking points we're going to bring up. And as we go here, feel free to let us know if you have any suggestions, comments, etc. We'd love to include you in the conversation here. So that being said, I've got a few different conversation pieces here that we've come up with for this episode. And the first one I want to talk about is an interesting one we had a conversation about not that long ago here. And I kind of have this point where I want to call it fear of expression is kind of my main talking point on this. So this all started about, a week ago it was? Almost.
Something like that.
About a week ago, we had this conversation, and we'll probably get into what brought it up in a little bit, but we were having this conversation about the fact that in our current modern world and our current state, both in fandom and community and just in general in the world, our kind of public persona is always out there. We're always kind of having to put ourselves out there in the world, whether it be through social media, through presentation, and especially when you're doing things like, hosting panels at conventions. You have a public persona and people look at you. And there's this idea of what can I say and what can't I say, so to speak. And what reactions will I get based on the things that I say and do and my opinions. And can I share my opinions? And it's a lot of different things. And this conversation we had recently got me thinking about a specific episode of Pony, which was the Fame and Misfortune episode, the one with the journal, where the intention was to put out this piece to help people, and then there was kind of this almost backlash against them when they put out something that they felt was positive into the world, but it wasn't received necessarily in that way, and it was misconstrued and changed and developed. And it's kind of this thing of, what does this mean, and what do we learn from this in our day-to-day lives? So I kind of want to toss this over to you for a minute, honey, of kind of maybe just go a little bit about where your mind was at when we first had this conversation, and kind of what you're thinking or what your thoughts are regarding this kind of issue.
Repeat the question.
So, obviously, when we had this conversation last week, we kind of had that piece that brought it up initially, and kind of what your thoughts are about having that kind of hesitation and that fear about your public persona being out there.
Well, it's tough because, during, our current situation, I haven't been able to, work. So I've been home a lot. So, needless to say, I discovered a video by a VTuber named Coco, which kind of made me dive into that rabbit hole. And needless to say, now, I'm very interested in becoming part of that world. But I know, seeing stuff that Coco has been having to go through with that little controversy, it's been making me very afraid to do something even as stupid and simple as like putting pronouns or something in a description, because people are really, really mean.
So let's to catch everybody up to speed on what we're discussing here. Essentially, this was a VTuber who had read was reading off some general statistics from a website, I believe.
It was the Google Analytics of her viewer base in different countries, and one of the countries she listed off was Taiwan, and yeah, China didn't like that.
So essentially, there is kind of this. There's a lot of internal turmoil within China, and especially when it comes to certain areas of the world, and Taiwan is one of them. So essentially, this VTuber was getting a lot of harassment from people who are very much supporting this kind of this position, this certain position within the argument over, I guess, that China has domain over Taiwan. And it's one of those things where it goes, you kind of take aback, because this has been something that's gone just from being a general just thing of somebody said something and weren't thinking. Now it's become, just because of somebody said something, now there's overt harassment that's going on. And I know you said you've seen some of these things.
Well, it was interesting because I was watching another VTuber, Kiara, and like all of a sudden, like there's just sudden spam, and it was like she had like nothing to do with that, and it's like to go think that hatred has poured over into people that had no like nothing to do with it, and it's very terrifying for someone that wants to go into that space, that it's like I'm putting myself out there, and like, you know, I'm a person with, you know, anxiety and depression, so harassment like that is like it's very scary.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that's one of the big things that we've been trying to kind of tackle, especially with this project here, is what kind of brings that on. Why do we get such vitriol in this? And I think that there's definitely there's something to kind of how the human brain works, and that there's a sense that you very much want to kind of process information quickly when you receive it, and we're very much built to kind of whatever we have as our kind of basis of the world. This is the way the world works. Your brain wants to keep getting information that feeds into that. So when you see something that contradicts that, there's that tendency to be like, no, I reject that reality. So I think it's one of the challenges that we've talked about a lot on here, is that one of the things that, and we all have to challenge ourselves with this, is how do we, or just kind of starting to recognize and challenge, maybe thinking things through a little bit before we react to something. And now, obviously, this is something where we can't control everybody else. And we can only kind of control ourselves, and we can talk to people and try to encourage things here. So, obviously, this is one of those things that's kind of plaguing on your mind right now. Now, a reason I brought up the pony episode was the lesson that I took away from it, and it's actually one that's really stuck with me, is this idea that everybody, like, you can't please everybody, but sometimes you might only make a difference with a few people. So is that something that kind of helps you, or is that kind of like where does your mind sit when you think about those things, about, like, you know, is it worth the fear to make a difference for a few people? Is that where the kind of that current debate is in your mind?
It definitely is. I think the debate right now is like I love advocating for like equal rights and all that jazz, but at the same token, like I'm just starting out, and it's like my inherent fear is like, does that limit my potential user base to start with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, granted, when I actually have a platform, then I can totally use it to state my mind, but it's like when you're just starting out, it's like that inherent fear of like what's okay to say, what's not okay to go say, like
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. I'm gonna bring up Matt Hatter Brony in the chat said that from what I've seen, people generally tend to think badly of sudden change or change overall, no matter if it's positive or not. Change is scary. I will definitely say that change is a scary thing, and change is stressful, no matter if it's positive or negative here. So there's definitely an element of that within there of how do we grow and change. And I think a big thing, and I think this is something we all constantly think about to an extent, is you have that inner thought of, man, if only the people around me could see it this way. And it's something that may be so obvious to us, it's very hard to get that point across to other people. And what I found, at least in my experience here, is the biggest thing is you kind of have to find a way to get through to somebody in a way that will appeal to them and their sensitivities, their sensibilities, what they have going on. And sometimes that's difficult, and sometimes that takes work. And that's the thing of, it's sometimes easier to make change in your little bubble and let that grow out than to make it instantly.
Like, I have to go say it's interesting. Like, I've been spending a lot of time with my mom due to health reasons. And it's interesting because, like, I'm always kind of like, I'm in my own little bubble, essentially, where, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, me and Forward have very similar, like, ideologies and thought processes. But then it's like, you're suddenly in this new environment, and it's like, you realize, like, holy cow, not everyone thinks just like I do.
There's definitely a shock to that,
and
I will say.
And yeah, then arguments start, and it's not great, but it's like, if you're constantly surrounding yourself with the same type of person with the same views, it's like you don't hear all the sides.
And that's a very good point. And it's one of these things, and Switchpone 3 here brought up something here saying that the two types of thought characteristics to identify and recognize pros and cons of are thinking fast and thinking slow, which there does have to be a balance, and that's 100% right. The way your brain reacts to things, your brain is kind of hardwired to instantly react with emotion first and foremost, and then your logic centers kind of kick in a little bit after that. And that boils down to the basics of survival instinct that's hardwired into us, kind of that fight or flight or freeze type of idea, where you are more prone to just kind of like, the greatest example I can have is, I just think about, in Metal Gear Solid, when you have that snake with the exclamation point when somebody's like, that's your reaction of like that sudden just exclamation point over your head, kind of. So it's a matter of, you need a little bit of that, and you also need to recognize your emotions within there. You can't just put it all away. You have to have some of the thought of, like, my emotions are real and I deserve to have them. Because if you push it all away and try to make yourself, for lack of a better terminology, a Vulcan, of trying to just go with all logic, you're kind of limiting part of yourself that's very much part of the human experience here. That being said, though, there is that thing where you can recognize your emotion and experience it, but then also let your logic centers kind of come through, especially when it comes to situations where you do have a chance to kind of take a moment and think about and communicate out. Because one thing I'll say is, especially with social media, you have that opportunity. If you see a post, you can react to it without instant, before you respond. You can react, process, think about what you want to say, and then respond. So that way you get your point across in the way you meant to get it across.
Also, one thing that is a little interesting that I didn't really think about until just now is, it's like, kind of going back to VTubers, is it's interesting because it's like if you're just texting someone, then like you don't get like you can have like an argument or whatever, but like you're not actually talking to the person, so you have the anonymity.
Anonymity, yeah.
But then you have like VTubers, which is interesting because you can text them and you can see like their reactions to stuff in their voice and what have you, but then they can't see you back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that's also kind of threatening, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I want to keep going in what we got in the chat here. So Shyfire here said about regarding VTubers that a lot of people are also gonna already judge whoever's talking just based on that title, so their opinion becomes kind of biased. And then there is a follow-up here from the Mad Hatter Brony of that people sometimes are influenced very much by biases, and that tends to ruin the conversation and discussion when people go in there thinking the other person's opinion doesn't matter as much because of X thing.
Oh my gosh, like I can't tell you how many times I've seen it where like, you know, if you have like an anime profile picture, then someone responds, "Oh, you have an anime profile picture, I'm not going to take you seriously." That happens way too much.
So one thing that I've said before that I've kind of always made is, at least my personal just take on things, is that if I enter into a conversation, which, let's say an argument, because the kind of the thing that I like to, my little slogan is more discussions, less arguments. Of if we want to, you know, like, sometimes you're going to argue. It happens. Heck, even we've had arguments. It's life. But I try to kind of frame myself around the idea that, can we have the discussions more than the arguing? Because if you enter an argument and your only thought is, I need to prove this person that I'm right, chances are you're not going to win. And chances are you're kind of like, you've already blocked yourself off to what the other person is saying. And we're all going to have biases too. I know I do, and I try to work myself to be as unbiased as possible. But, you know, like, especially when you get into political discussions, or you bring in, like, politics and religion, those are the two hot button ones that people always talk about. I think the thing is that there's that fine line about where you can differentiate an opinion. When it comes to things like human rights and things like that, that's one thing. But when it comes to, like, I might have a difference with somebody on a political scale of, like, what we're doing economically or something like that. And that is always up for debate, because nobody has the ultimate answer. Nobody has the ultimate solution, and we can always grow by having these conversations. So it's something to definitely keep in mind. SamuDash had here about, I often have the fear that others adjust to sudden changes faster than I am, then I'm kind of left behind just because I'm scared of new things or new environments. Yeah, change is definitely scary. New environments can be definitely frightening. I think part of the thing, at least for me on my end, is finding something to kind of be your stepping stone within it, of finding kind of that thing that is like, that you can hold on to, that is making you get some kind of sense of comfortability. And actually this kind of transitions into a little bit of depression and anxiety conversation and friendship, of it's scary to look at new situations, especially so if you are depressed or have social anxiety. There's all of those fears that your brain will just kind of throw at you. And I've talked about this in panels before about meeting a new friend, and there's situations that make it more likely to meet a new friend because you have a little something there to hold on to. For example, proximity. A good example that I've used in the past is, if you are in, let's say you're in a classroom, and all of a sudden you have to pick a partner for a project. A lot of times you will look at the person right next to you and be like, you want to do this? That is if you don't know somebody already in the classroom.
I mean, I do have a bucket of chicken.
Oh, goodness. But No, but there's a thing to that. There is an element there of like, because you have the proximity, you kind of have that shared thing that we're in this line together. We have this like we're at this table together. I've had that, I know, in college heavily. And it kind of influences the kind of the likability that you can be able to have that. So it's kind of like having those little things that you can use as starting points to find that little comfortability. And obviously we all have our things here. I'm seeing a lot of plushie chat or in the chat room, and yeah, we like plushies.
Totally don't have a problem or anything. No.
You can never have too many plushies, right?
Agreed.
There's, and that's definitely something. I think we all have that. For the longest time, I feel that there was that sense of like, at least me growing up, when you kind of being told like you'll grow out of something. And that was kind of one of those like, oh, you'll grow out of your stuffed animals and all this. And we're the adults now, so we get to decide how we adult.
Okay.
So
we get to decide what act your age means.
that being said, it's not that we didn't grow. I think there is an element of growth within that of there's nothing wrong with having a plushie to snuggle, especially for comfort. And that definitely can be a help. It's just a matter of, granted, not all of us are going to throw ourselves into our plushie and make it our waifu and the rest of the world goes away. That's a whole different topic. But there's definitely something to be said about having a comfort piece. And I think that that's always good to have, because there's sometimes you need that thing to get you through the day, or that reminder. A good friend of ours, you probably know her as Brass Knuckles or as Riftwing Design. She used to do a series of panels called Cosplay for Confidence, and talk about how you can do kind of almost secret or just casual cosplay elements, or things that, say there's a character you love and you find inspiration in them, that you can find elements from what they do and meld it into your wardrobe in ways that people wouldn't realize, whether it be by color scheme, or you could have like a piece underneath and then wear like an overshirt or something, but you have that, and that piece gives you that extra confidence because you have something that's giving that element. So when you are reminded of, I'm wearing this and this can help me get through that next step, which is amazing. And yes, SamuDash, bring it up. Our friend Riftwing is doing yoga tomorrow morning, so she became a certified yoga instructor. So definitely want to check out yoga tomorrow morning. But yeah, there's definitely something about having that comfort. And I know for us, we have, we've talked about this before. Both of us have clinical depression, which makes life interesting, definitely. Granted, it's not that, like, we've both, have sought treatment, and I'm on medication and everything, but recently I actually had to switch to a new medication, which kind of has made me unbalanced. And that's been a definite thing where sometimes you have that difficulty in getting kind of over to that next step. And I think that's been a thing with us. I think that we've kind of observed with each other over the last couple of weeks. So, and we each handle and process our depression differently. I know I'm very much a social butterfly, and I feel better when I talk to people. A couple weeks ago, we got some not so great news, and I had to be home alone for a bit, and I reached out to a couple of friends, and we did a Discord chat, and I ended up crying a couple of times throughout that chat because it's exactly what I needed to get through. So I needed that social interaction to get it out. But it's not that way for everybody, and I know you're kind of a little bit different with how you cope.
Yeah, no, like me, I'm an introvert, so I like my way of coping is I'm gonna wrap myself around in blankets and just like lie there for like an hour, and then I'm like I emerge from my cocoon being like, okay, I'm ready to go now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, although granted, like there are times where just like kind of like talking to people can help get me out of my head, because like then you don't really think about things.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be kind of unique to the situation, but I think that's that thing of what's crucial for all of us is identifying what is that piece that gets us through. And gosh, there was something great that just got said in the chat about no one should be judged for whatever their comfort thing is, and that's so yes. Everybody's going to have that comfort piece, and I think that's the one of the key things we have is finding our comfort piece. And one thing to bring it back is I think a lot of us found that comfort, at least, at least in moments with shows like My Little Pony in our media that we are a part of, or that we partake in. Because I know a lot of us probably have, and I'll put this out there, if people have go-to episodes when you're feeling down. I know I have mine. You have one, don't you?
I actually have two. One is the one with Autumn Blaze. I'm blanking.
Oh gosh, I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but I know.
And then the other one, and it's really strange, is May the Best Pet Win. I don't know why. I really love that episode.
It's a great song.
It's a good song.
Sound of Silence.
Sound of Silence.
Thank you, Dark Angel.
Great Simon and Garfunkel song.
Yes. My go-to is Mystery on the Friendship Express, which is it's just because Pinky's so ridiculous. It makes me laugh every time, and it's fantastic. So
agreed.
Great Dashy episode, yes. For May the Best Pet Win. Pony music, also. You find your comfort, whether sometimes it's music. I know, gosh, as a child, when I wasn't getting treated for my depression, music was the thing. I'd come home and I'd throw myself on the bed and I would play music and just drown my sorrows in it, essentially. But it's what I needed. It's what helped carry me through. And we're all going to have that at times. And no matter what it is, having that is a big thing. And I think the piece that I kind of want to take away from this too is that we're finding, and I'm reading some of the stuff in the chat here, which is fantastic, that everybody is kind of talking about what what their thing is. What is their piece? The fact that we can talk about our pieces, that is what the comfort is. I think that is a step in connecting to everyone else. It's a step to making connections. It's a step to kind of breaking down barriers and saying, I go through this too. Maybe we can have more conversations. And it may not be the same thing, but I feel we all have those times where we're down and we need to reach out for something. And we can share in that kind of, that similar mindset, so to speak. I love this from Switchpone3 here was talking about getting others in a position for thinking and not asking the attacking kind of question, but rather giving people a chance to step back, think things through, and share their knowledge of the subject. Another great point is when we're interacting with others.
Because I know I had that happen to me, yesterday, 2 days ago, where I got in a debated conversation or heated conversation with someone about a subject, and it's a subject very near and dear to my heart for reasons, but they had kind of the opposing view, but it kind of got to a point where like I'm like, look, like these are like my evidence, I guess, where it's like take it or let it mull over and then come to me, essentially. And then they did eventually, you know, think about it a little bit more, which I'm happy. But it was, it was a hard conversation.
And I think that's a thing, like, we kind of all have to do, because it's important to remember that something somebody else says might not even be 100% correct in what they're telling you or the point they're trying to make, but it might, if we think about it, it might spurn something else in the conversation. It might cause us to think about something in a different way, to grow, you know, kind of our perspective and our knowledge on something. And I sound like a cliche version of myself sometimes, I think, but there's this great thing from Star Trek about one of the things it means to be human is to have the capacity to better yourself. And I feel like that's a thing about just being human, being alive, is we're always trying to make ourselves better. So whatever we can do to do that, it's like every day you can learn something. Every day you learn something new. I think the biggest thing is trying to be open to it. And it's easier said than done at times, because it's very easy to block out the new information. It's so easy to.
Because it's like, well, especially when fear is involved, because I think with the subject that I was talking about a minute ago there, was it's like a big ruling factor in it is people think with their fear before they think with their logic. And then when it's like you bring the logic part of their, you know, to their fear, then it's like, oh yeah, I guess, you know, didn't really think about it.
So this is not a right or wrong thing. It's just a thought experiment to put out there, because I've been having this with myself, because I do suffer from generalized anxiety disorder, and I have a lot of times where I get this sometimes paralyzing fear in a moment over things that probably, you know, arguably shouldn't, but it does matter to me, which is, you know, it's important to recognize that. But that sense of fear, and I kind of try to challenge myself and say to myself of, do I want fear to be the thing that controls my life? And maybe that's, and I don't know if that's exactly how people are, you know, what people need. Everybody kind of needs their own thing. But there's something empowering for me when I can have a moment and go, I'm not going to let this be the thing that controls me, or be the thing that ends me or rules me. A lot of times I think that there's that inner monologue you have to have back and forth, and it's difficult. It is difficult to have that inner monologue, but I think it's important. You know, to kind of, and it sounds so cliche, but kind of telling yourself those positive statements and boosting yourself up. And sometimes what you need is a plushie. What you need is an episode of Pony to put on a music to inspire you to be like, I can do this. So, oh, that's great to hear SamuDash saying, let so many new things into my life over the last few weeks, which scared me at first, but it really was time that I finally did it and doing so much better. It's great to hear that. And Matt Hatter Brony saying about true people tend to act with their fear before they even think, and that can lead to a lot of hurt. It does happen.
Also, as kind of an addendum, fear is also helpful. That it's like,
yes,
because I know in our current climate, like, it's like there's two spectrums, I guess, where there's the one where, like, you can be just way too scared, like myself, to even go outside, which that's, you know, like, that's not the best. But then it's also like, don't be stupid. For lack of better words.
Well, okay, so fear is put in place for specific things, and it's to keep us from harming ourselves, essentially. It's self-preservation is what it is at its core. So there's definitely that element of, there are things that it's okay to be afraid of, and it's okay to have a little bit of intimidation. It's a matter of kind of analyzing, I guess, each situation as it comes up and taking from it what we need to. So, gosh, we've talked about fear a lot.
It's an amazing, yeah. It's incredibly helpful, but incredibly unhelpful at the same time.
Oh, Shyfire, that's great. Saying that they're not diagnosed but dealing with depression too, and entering the Brony fandom, best decision of their life, as at the lowest point, but started working their way out of the depression and thinking positively of themselves. So, yes, this is the power of fandom at its core. And this is the thing that I think is kind of the roundabout of what we want to talk about here is there's a lot of things. I hear a lot of times people talk about toxic fandoms. And I think what I've seen mostly through the communities, at least that we've traveled, is you end up having people who are, a lot of people within fan communities who are very positive and very, really taking, Pony is a great example of taking the lessons from the show and taking it to heart and taking it to be, what it's meant to be and growing from it. And then you have people who are going to be negative. It's impossible to eliminate all the negative people. And a lot of times what ends up happening is the vocal minority stands out. And it kind of gives you this impression of fandom of toxic or toxicity.
My best advice is like, especially when it comes to Twitter, don't look at the comment section. That I've been making that mistake for the past week, and it's not great. It's not good for the mental health.
I'll say this: you can make your choices. I have taken mental health days from social media, and I think every once in a while it's not a bad idea to do that to recharge. Because sometimes, I think knowing your limits is very important. Because I know for myself, I've had moments lately where I've recognized, like, I'm adjusting to a new medication. So my levels are out of balance right now until they fully adjust. So I'm trying to recognize within myself when the fear's taking over, when the anxiety's taking over, when the depression's hitting, and going, I can only handle up to X thing. And it doesn't make you weak. If anything, it makes you stronger that you can recognize that within yourself. If you can recognize that you need if you can recognize what you need in that moment, I think that is the strongest thing you can do. And if anybody says you're weak, I'm here to back you up. I think there's a definitely, and it gets into things about kind of the norms we've been taught about, like, act tough, stay tough. It's okay to cry, and it's okay to recognize you have limits. Because sometimes when we push yourself over our limits, that's when we break down completely. Also,
one thing that could be said, kind of going back to, like, the toxic fandoms, is it's like, the Brony fandom is, interesting because, like, we have our dedicated pony conventions, and, like, we have, I feel like, two different fandoms. We have an online fandom, and we have a in-person fandom, and they're, I don't think, quite the same thing.
It depends, I think.
Because, like, whenever I've had nothing but good experiences going to, like, conventions and stuff. Like, it's always so warm and welcoming.
There's a bunch of different factors, I think, that go into it. It's one of those things about online, if somebody says something negative, it tends to stick out a lot. Because it's up there for everyone to see. A lot of people are inherently reacting, and that's when you get, like, internet trolls that bringing on, like, the back and forth heated debate, and not even debate. Debate is the wrong word, where it just gets heated for the sake of people getting heated. And then in person, one thing that you do have, especially at in-person conventions, and granted, people have different experiences, so I'm not going to say, your experience may vary, but you have staff, you have security, you have things where, and also you have a big convention center where you could go to staff if you're having a problem with somebody, and you could just leave. Granted, if somebody's harassing you, obviously then staff is going to have to take care of it. And never let yourself be harassed. One thing Blue Latios brought up here, and shout out to a great legendary Pokemon, but about that toxicity can be avoided in part because of sub-communities within the fandom. So you can kind of choose where you go into and where you don't, and the circles you travel. And I find that to actually be true. And I think that there's a thing, I know for me, like as a kid, I always was a big dreamer. Who'd have guessed it, right? But I was always like, I'm going to change the world. And then I grew up and realized how hard that is. So I choose now to kind of think about, I have my bubble. And I have my bubble of people that I'm close to. And then I have another bubble that's around there of people that, you know, maybe aren't the inner circle, but I'm still friends with them. Like, I'm willing to make friends with anybody. But then it's kind of like you kind of choose the level of your interaction, and what you do is you let the bubble of positivity kind of flow out. It starts there in that little bubble, and, you know, you kind of let it flow out. Because it's that thing about changing the norms. And Mad Hatter Brony here said a thing about dealing with a lot of the social thing of men need to be tough and hindering them. And, oh my gosh, yes. That's... Gender norms is one of the hardest things we've had to kind of break ourselves of, and we're still having a difficult time of it. It's one of the big things where, you know, where we're having such debates right now about transgender issues and everything, is because we've gotten so accustomed to these gender roles, and as we go, we find out that these things are more fluid and changing. And again, this is the fear of change. But we're finding more and more, if we kind of, the way I've always looked at it is the influence of what you have around you in your little circle, so to speak, here is you have that place where you can kind of be yourself and kind of have that support structure and everything here, and you can set breaking those gender norms, breaking those social norms that are wrong, so to speak. And granted, wrong is a very general term and probably not one I should have used, but maybe outdated would be a good way to say of we're growing and we're finding out that, you know, we can be more equal as people. Still have to be unique and still have to recognize that, you know, men face different challenges than women. That, you know, white people face different challenges than black people, than Asian people, etc., etc. That young people face different challenges than old people. The list goes on. And we have to respect that. But that there are a lot more similarities to us than there are differences. And there's definitely a conversation to be had about kind of looking at everything here and what we can do, where kind of the idea of the, you know, the acting tough and it being, you know, like the boys shouldn't cry, I think is that kind of old adage here of recognizing that you can be masculine and tough and still cry, and that's okay. And I want to say too, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being masculine. Like, there's definitely nothing wrong with being a man or being a woman. And some people fall into some stereotypes and such, and that just happens. But I think the thing is just respecting that not everybody is the same within that, and giving the space to figure each other out, I think is a big piece of the puzzle. And I think that was a big thing we got from Pony, is learning, especially in the later seasons, the more and more we got to see different species, I guess would be the proper term, different creatures. When we're meeting Kieran, we're meeting Yax, we're meeting, you know, all these different groups of people that look at things different ways. But just because we're different doesn't mean we have to be at odds with each other. We can figure these things out, and we can kind of make for a little bit of a better tomorrow. The biggest thing I think, though, is being able to have the conversation. The conversation, I think, is the first piece. We may not always agree at first. That's fine. We don't always have to agree on everything. I think the biggest thing is if we can agree about respecting each other as people, respecting each other as an individual, that no matter, like, you know, And a lot of this comes down to isms, your racism, sexism, ageism, all of that, where saying, okay, like, I'm not going to, I'm going to respect you for who you are and have these conversations, but recognizing you still have human rights and have that be the basis. And then you kind of go from there of, okay, like, we're going to respect each other. So let's have a conversation about what we're thinking and just listen to each other. You might need to go have your emotions and react if you don't like it and don't agree, but come back to it. Have that conversation. Keep having conversations. That's how we grow and progress as a society. I kind of just went on a long spiel there, didn't I?
You are good.
We have probably about 7 minutes left or so. So I'm trying to get everything from the chat we can. It's a good point. People are talking about characters they connect with. Let me ask you this, honey. Is there a character you feel that you connect with, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Pony, it can be anything, that because you connect with them, it has made a difference for you?
Well, I mean, Blackjack. I always go back to Blackjack from Project Horizons.
Go on.
Where do I freaking begin?
I know.
Like, just, I guess a lot of, I think the one thing that I truly feel with her is the whole, like, do better mantra that she has, where, like, I believe everyone has the ability to do better, and I just wish everyone would actually do that. Like, me, like, I've realized that pretty much every day it's like you're always working on yourself until the day you die, and then it's like it kills me inside just seeing people that's like, okay, this is who I am, I'm done growing. And I've met a few people like that in my life, and it baffles me.
There's definitely, I think that there's a thing. I used to work in retail management, and I remember there was somebody I had hired one time, and we were discussing, myself and my manager above me were discussing about people to promote. And I remember something they said that kind of stuck with me and bothered me, is it was like oh, she's such and such age, she's set in her ways, we're not going to be able to grow her.
I hate it so much.
And that's always stuck with me about, like, that's just that, and that happens, and we make those assumptions, and for some people it might be true. I'm not gonna lie. That's that thing of, like, there can be modicums of truth. And yes, I know I used to work retail. I don't anymore. Hooray! But all power to anybody working in retail, especially right now during this pandemic. You are doing...
Or you live in Texas.
Yes. Just everybody who's out there right now on the front lines, on everything, braving...
braving the cold and the...
Yeah, I can't tell you how much we
world.
appreciate you. I really just... Yes. So, sorry.
I'm gonna say, because I've been going and just working retail. I worked at a Toys R Us back when those were still open, and I will never freaking forget. This kid wanted to go buy, like a little boy wanted to go buy Animal Crossing, and then his mom was just like, "No, that game's for girls," and I wanted choice words for that woman. First of all, I don't understand. Second of all, like, let him be himself, enjoy what he wants to.
Animal Crossing especially is an interesting one. Especially, it's funny looking back on it now, because let's face it, Animal Crossing is how, like, so many people got through the beginning months of a pandemic. It was like I think it's going to go... Animal Crossing New Horizons is going to go down as one of the most important video game launches ever. Which is just because of timing. And that people needed something to immerse themselves in, and it gave people that thing. And this brings us back to what we said earlier. Look at we're coming full circle about having that piece that helps you get through. It can be Animal Crossing. It can be a plushie. It can be a pony episode. It can be a character. It can be a cosplay. There's so many things. The most important thing is recognizing within yourself that you can have that thing, accepting it, and using it to help you be the best you can be. And the, you know, like, be the best you can be. Be all that you can be. We're not the army, but, you know. But it's a good slogan. I'm not going to lie. Okay. It really, like, there's so much that we can do. And I think that's the thing about, like, at the end of the day, we might not be able to do everything out there. But we can challenge ourselves to be the best us we can be and feel good about ourselves. And you know what? We might stumble. We might fall. That's okay. That's how we grow. That's how we learn. Kind of the We're Not Flawless episode we talked about at the beginning, where, was it Fame and Misfortune, I want to say was the name of the episode, where there were mistakes that were in the book, and then people were, you know, and ponies were like, well, why did you do this? Or why didn't you grow right away? But that's how they got to here, was through those mistakes and learning.
Also, Fluttershy's quote is probably my favorite from the entire series of, have you ever learned a lesson once and completely changed who you are? And it's like, that I feel is so important, because it's so easy, like you learn a lesson, you want to work on something, but it's pretty much inevitable that, like, you might slip up once or twice, and then you shouldn't just freaking, like, put yourself down because you messed up once, because...
Yeah. We have 60 seconds.
Okay.
Okay. We have to wrap up, and I'm going to do it with Switchpone 3 here, saying about, we can have powers taken from us, but that never makes us powerless. There's always something we can do, no matter how small. It's very much like the Made in Manhattan episode of Pony. If everyone puts in a little bit of effort, we can make a big difference. That being said, I want to thank all of you in the chat. You guys are amazing. You've had great conversation. Thank you for joining us. Myself and or Nova Rose will hopefully be popping up in a couple other panels over the weekend. So thank you all. Where can people find you, hon?
They can find me on Twitter at Nova Roselia. And
you can find me on Twitter at KeepFriendMagic. If you are so inclined, you can find the podcast at our hub at kfm.buzzsprout.com. And we have a Patreon, patreon.com/KFM. You get early access to new videos, and you get access to my new vlog I just started. So thank you all for being here. We love you guys, and remember to keep friendship magic out there.
bye!
A huge thank you to our patrons, SamuDash, Frenchie McHugh, Riftwing Design, Statman Dan, and Jason Kuzmak. Without your support, this project wouldn't be possible.